that Metroid Dread has come and gone, and with Metroid Prime 4 on the horizon, I think it's time to look at the future of the Metroid franchise, specifically where it's going to go from here and what the future could hold in store for us as fans. I've done a video like this once before, not on this channel, it was actually on my older channel, which still exists by the way, and I've been wanting to do a video like that since Metroid Dread came out, because it's given me an opportunity to revisit that topic now that one of the games I talked about in that video has released and the other one is on the horizon. It's given me the opportunity to revisit that topic with a newfound hope for the future. So that's the basis of this video here today. For years, when we talked about what the future of Metroid could hold, we've always come to the same two games, Metroid Dread and Metroid Prime 4. One of them has come out and the other is coming out soon, definitely within the next 2 years. But what comes after that? What comes after Metroid Dread, timeline-wise, and what comes after Metroid Prime 4? So, to look at where the future of Metroid is going, let's look at the situation as we currently stand with things. So, it's 2021, Metroid Dread has just released, and as I just said, Metroid Prime 4 will be out sometime in the next 2 years. Given the success of Metroid Dread, the really successful sales numbers of it, and the hype among fans, the critical acclaim the game has gotten, Metroid is on better footing than it's ever been before. And so, is this the resurgence we've been waiting for? Are we finally going to start seeing more frequent releases going forward? Maybe I'm just being hopeful, but yes, when you really look into it, it's possible Metroid for the next few years could be a yearly franchise again. Going into the 2020s, it could be a repeat of what we had in the early 2000s, because for Metroid Prime 4, the name 4 is in the title. Obviously, Nintendo is going to want to attract new players and catch older players up to date as well, who might need some refreshing. How are they going to do this? It's obvious. We've talked about it every year since 2017. Bringing the Metroid Prime trilogy to Switch, remastering it, putting it in HD, and obviously, if that's going to come out before Prime 4, it would have to come out a year before. So even if Prime 4 is a 2024 release, Prime Trilogy would be 2023, which I don't think is likely, because if Prime 4 comes out in 2024, that's like a 6-year development cycle, and there's no way the game would take that long. By 2023, Prime 4 would already have 5 years of development, so 2023 at the latest is when Prime 4 is coming out. But as for the trilogy, obviously there's no certainty this will happen, and obviously recent rumors are suggesting we're getting a Metroid Prime remake instead of the whole trilogy. That remains to be seen, but regardless, for the sake of argument here, we don't know for certain if we're getting some sort of Metroid Prime before Prime 4. It's not guaranteed. We presume it is, but we also presumed Super Mario Galaxy 2 would be included in 3D All-Stars, and we also presumed Nintendo was going to celebrate Zelda's 35th anniversary. We can never be certain, but the obvious example is they would do that because those are big AAA games. They'd be easy to port, and Prime 3 is possible to port. Now that Mario Galaxy 1 and Skyward Sword have both come to the Switch, there's nothing holding back Prime 3 anymore, because Nintendo has now perfected the ability to translate motion controls on a Wii game into Switch controls. So there's no barrier of entry there. So the only thing that would prevent Metroid Prime or Metroid Prime Trilogy from coming to the Switch would be Nintendo just deciding it's not worth it or just getting lazy with it. But I don't think that's the case. Prime 4 is such a big game. I feel like they'll really want to catch people up to date, because it's been 2007 was when Metroid Prime 3 came out. It's been a long time, and Given how quick they could bring the games over, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. Plus, if you believe rumors, Metroid Prime Trilogy has been done since 2018. So, and if that's the case, Metroid Prime Trilogy or Metroid Prime 1 Remake, whatever, would come out next year, if it exists. Which means maybe we see it at the Game Awards, which is a topic I will address in another video. But if it's coming out a year before Metroid Prime 4, that means next year. So you could have had Dread this year, some version of Prime next year to prep you for Prime 4, and then Prime 4 in 2023. And suddenly you've 3 years in a row of Metroid releases. And this isn't far-fetched, because Metroid has been a yearly release quite a few times. Federation Force and Samus Returns. Federation Force in 2016, Samus Returns in 2017. Metroid Prime Hunters in 2006, Metroid Prime 3 in 2007. And it goes back further than that as well. So it's not out there. It's not insane to say that we could see yearly releases for the next few years. But then, okay, if Metroid Prime 4 comes out in 2023, obviously that's going to set up its own story. We don't know what's going to happen there, so we can't really definitively talk about that. But what happens then for Metroid beyond that? What's the future beyond Metroid Prime 4? Is it a new trilogy? Is it Metroid Prime 5? Is it Metroid Prime 6? Are they just going to go back to remaking older games? Does Prime 1 come out first and then they remake 2 and 3 after 4? Obviously, we can't say for certain, but logically speaking, it's an assumption. But I feel like a trilogy is likely. There's no way Nintendo would bring back an IP like Metroid Prime for just one sequel instead of multiple. Why do just 4 when you could also do 5 and 6? That's more money, more games. You also get to develop the story more. Just makes more sense. You fill out your years. That's an extra release for Nintendo. So I'm pretty certain and confident that 5 and 6 are going to happen someday. I've made a few videos in the past talking about this. Obviously, Metroid Prime 4 could prove me wrong and come out and maybe it's a one and done type of story and that's it. But because I think Nintendo will want to bridge the gap between the Prime games and Samus Returns, maybe they do a whole trilogy. Plus, setting more games after Prime 4 allows them to keep that area of the timeline going and they're not running out of space. It just makes a lot of sense to make more sequels. If that's the case, when do we see a Metroid Prime 4 sequel? And God, that's a hefty question because obviously we don't know exactly when Prime 4 comes out, but even if we did, like, what is the development time of Prime 4? If you ignore the delay, 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years, I guess, if we're just counting 2018 to 2023, I guess 5 years. So does that mean Metroid Prime 5 would take 5 years? No, because Prime 4, you can bet, is being done with a new engine, a new visual style that's still in the same vein as the previous games, but it's all new. Whereas if they do a sequel to Prime 4, obviously it's going to run on the same engine, the same visual style, just like the original trilogy, so the development time is cut down immensely. Obviously the argument is, well, Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 is running on the same engine, same world, and same characters as the first game, yet it's taking just as long as the first game to come out. And obviously, who's to say a Prime 5 doesn't get delayed and all these other circumstances that could potentially happen. That's all possible. But for the sake of simplicity here, and for the sake of argument, let's just say everything goes smoothly. I don't think a Metroid Prime 5 would take more than 3 years. I think 2 years, given that it's reusing everything. So if we bring that into play, Prime 5 would come out. If Metroid Prime 4 comes out in 2023, Prime 5 could be 2025. What about 2D Metroid? By the time Metroid Prime 4, even if you don't believe in the trilogy, right? Let's just say Metroid Prime 4 is the next release. By the time Metroid Prime 4 comes out, I'm certain it's 2023. Let's be honest here, it's 99% likely it is. By the time it comes out in 2023, the next 2D Metroid game is almost done, because they started work on Metroid Dread immediately after Samus Returns came out. 4 years. Probably delayed a year because of the pandemic. So, why? Of course, they're going to be working on the next 2D Metroid immediately after Dread. Sakamoto even said himself at E3, they're already working on the next game. Whether that means they're in prototype stage or it's still ideas, obviously no way of knowing, but the fact is they're working on something. So 2021 to 2024, that's 3 years. It's probably going to run off the same engine as Dread did. It comes out the year after Metroid Prime 4. The year after that, 2025, you could have Metroid Prime 5. And then in 2026, I think that's when it stops. I think that's when our yearly trend comes to an end, because in 2027, the next Nintendo console is going to come out. And I think Metroid Prime 6 will probably come out in 2028. Somewhere around then. So I think we're going to see a gap, just so that there's not an oversaturation and franchise fatigue. And obviously depending on sales and stuff as well. Unless they come up with a remake. Maybe there's a Super Metroid remake that comes out instead of a new 2D game. Or maybe Mercury Steam takes a break from Metroid, since they just did Samus Returns and Dread back to back. So maybe 2024, 5, and 6 don't have, or 2024 and 2026 don't have games, and we wait till 2028 for another 2D game. I'm just making these dates up off the top of my head, just a vague roadmap. I think Prime 6 would be a launch title or second year title for the next console, and Metroid 6, if it hasn't already come out, would come out for then. And maybe Metroid 6 comes out in 2024, then Metroid 7 would come out in 2029. And then obviously, who knows beyond that? Maybe another M remake, maybe a Hunters remake, Fusion Super. You get the point. The gist with the idea I'm trying to get across to you here is, I think Metroid, for at least the next 4 years, is going to be a yearly franchise. Because everything is aligning for it to be. You keep the hype going from game to game. You've satisfied the 2D fans of the game. Now it's time to start building to your major release, Metroid Prime 4. You do that by reintroducing the trilogy or a remake into the crowd. Maybe you take a year break after Prime 4 and then the next 2D game comes along. Perhaps. But regardless, I am 99% certain that we're getting the next 3 to 4 years for Metroid releases. And that gets me so excited, because the fact that I can say that with such confidence, whereas compared to a few years ago when I did the last video, I was uncertain. It was a sort of what if scenario. What if we get Dread? What if we get Prime 4? This or that. Whereas now the future is more clearer. And the best case scenario is we get games every year for the next 3 to 4 years. Worst case scenario is we don't get a game for another year or two. Think about it. The worst case scenario right now is that we don't get a Metroid game until December 2023. Maybe summer 2024. That's the worst case scenario. And that's already still like a huge win. And we're not waiting 4 to 5 years for the next game. I think Nintendo's going to ride this hype going for the rest of the Switch's life. For the back years of the Switch's life, we're going to get multiple Metroid releases. Things are going to calm down at the end of the Switch's life. And right at the launch of the next console, Nintendo's next-gen system, whatever it is, Metroid will come back. Maybe not as a launch title, depending on how things end up. Maybe in the year after. The cycle repeats. Maybe at that point they wouldn't need to do a yearly release. I think at that point, I mean, I hope it doesn't go back to being a 4 to 5 year release, but I think at that point it might go to being once every 2 years. And that's fine if the games are substantial enough. Obviously, I'd love a yearly release, but if Nintendo just wants to have a yearly release for the next few years just to get us set up, and then for things to calm down once Metroid is firmly established in the public domain, I'm cool with that as well. I'm just really excited at the fact that there's so much potential in the next few years. The Pandora's box is opened. Anything could happen at this point. And of course, I could be completely wrong in everything, and Prime 4 comes out in 2024, 2025, and it's the only Prime game they're doing, and the next 2D game doesn't come out till 2027. Possible. I don't work in Nintendo, so obviously I don't have all the answers, but those are just my 2 cents on the idea. The future of Metroid looks really bright, and I am so excited to see where it goes. I think we will see Metroid at the Game Awards in some fashion. I say that every year, obviously, but eventually it will come true if I say it enough. But that's something I'll talk about in another video. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. What do you think of everything I've said here? Do you agree with me? What do you think the future of Metroid looks like? Do you think it's going to become a yearly release for the next few years? Do you think they're going to throw in some remakes? What do you think the next 10 years of Metroid essentially are going to be like? Because essentially, if I'm right, in the next 10 years, from 2021 to 2031, that's Dread, Prime Trilogy, Prime 4, 5, 6, Metroid 6, and potentially Metroid 7. That's 7 games in 10 years, if I'm correct, best case scenario, which mimics what we got between 2002 to 2007. Are we really at that point again? Is Metroid about to go back to its glory days? I want to hear everything you have to say down in the comment section below. And yeah, with that all said, thank you all for watching and please subscribe. Novus Corvius out.